Great. Karibu, which means welcome in Swahili. So welcome to all of you. I'm very excited to have you here and very grateful for Church and partnering with them. And just excited to share a story with you. I'm here to tell you a story. I don't know if that's watching. Okay. Here to tell you a story about how do you take mountain biking and hiking and adventure tourism and combine it with challenging with community conservation and how do you put all of that together. So I'm here to tell you a story about taking sustainable tourism to the next level and how that works for me in particular in the work that I do. So quick show of hands, how many of you have been on a trip, maybe here in Tahoe or somewhere else, that you feel like it is truly given back to the people that you've traveled through or the land that you've traveled through? All right, I've got a couple of hands. Would you like to share your story or where you went?
Papua New Guinea. We stayed at a village, which was a resort, but they also supported the community, and the community was very involved. We did a lot of things with the kids and students and so on.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, imagine that was not the exception, but it was the norm.
Yeah.
That when we traveled, we gave back to the places where we traveled through and the people that we interacted with. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Tara Hetz. I got to grow up in East Africa. I was born in the Netherlands and then raised in Kenya for the first 2 years of my life. And then my parents, with a Dutch mother and an American father, landed in Serengeti National Park, and I grew up there, they didn't, but my friends, including monkeys. And my days were spent exploring the wildlife around me and long dinner conversations with a multitude of different people who came to the table to talk about conservation, to talk about anti-poaching, to talk about tourism. And I'm an only child, so you can imagine I spent a lot of time with adults. Next slide. And now I spent more than half of my life living abroad. So that didn't just include East Africa, but I also grew up in Eastern Europe and then spent a ton of time back in Africa. Has anyone heard of the country Equatorial Guinea? No. Only, fun fact, only Spanish speaking country in all of Africa. I bet you didn't, maybe you knew that. And then also other parts of Europe. My background is in conservation biology, and then I studied sustainable tourism. And now I live here in Truckee and work in Tahoe City, where I apply my degree and also my interests, where we take tourism tax dollars, so people can spend the night, and also the TBID, the Tourism Business Improvement District, where you go to Tahoe House and you see that additional line item. We take that money and we reinvest that back into the community, and we do that through a grant program. And I run that grant program, so I get to see all these really cool projects that come through, and that supports our communities, our community priorities here in Tahoe. So it's kind of like I get to do what I studied. Okay, next one. But basically what I want to talk about is I'm also the founder and executive director of Mazingira Adventures, and our signature trip is Adventure for Rhinos, which I'm going to tell you about tonight. And I'm also just launched my own nonprofit called Mazingira Conservation Works. And you're probably like, what the heck are those two things? How are they interconnected? And what does Mazingira mean? Like what? Mazingira in Swahili, which is the language spoken in East Africa, means environment. And so we are going on environmental tours or adventures and environmental conservation works. I'm sure you can take the play on words for that. And here it's an idea of really combining adventure tourism and community conservation. These are some of the groups of women that we work with in Kenya. So, sustainable tourism. It's a concept that's been around for more than 40 years. But its implementation is a little wonky out there. But it's all about an idea of balance. And I like to really think about it in the terms of the 4 C's. And that's something that I've studied personally, but also something that I talk a lot about and I think a lot about. And we talk about community, conservation, culture, and commerce. And so when I talk about conservation, I talk about different land management practices that are in place that protect the natural environment. And here, the endangered black rhino and these rangers. And so within Kenya, they're dedicating parts of private lands and community owned lands to protecting this endangered species. How they're doing it is important. Community. If you don't involve the people who are living next to these private conservancies or next to the national parks, or don't involve the community just here in Tahoe in your efforts, you're forgetting about a huge piece of the puzzle. And community is incredibly important. What are their perspectives on the initiatives that are happening? Culture. Kenya itself is made up of 42 different tribes, and each tribe has its own cultural practices. Some overlap with others, but one that you may have heard of is the Maasai culture. And these are women and the culture that we work with predominantly in this part of Kenya. And what are their indigenous practices? What do they believe are the solutions to protecting the environment? What do they think as traditional practices that need to be involved? And then lastly, commerce. How are you putting in place sustainable revenues that go back into the community? What efforts are you giving to these groups to actually supply with them with sustainable efforts? You know, I'd say a lot of people travel to Kenya and Tanzania and they hand out money. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, you can give a man a fish, but if you give him a fishing rod and the ability to say, how do I write a budget? How do I tell a story? How do I apply for other grants? That gives them a longer livelihood. So that's the model that I'm putting here together. I am taking adventure tourism because I love to spend my time outdoors, like many of you here, mountain biking and skiing and hiking, and combining it with community conservation efforts. And so I'm gonna give you a little bit more of an in-depth example of that through my signature trip, Adventure for Rhinos. And this logo has a lot going on in it. If you don't know, this is the Kenyan flag in the background. And what's really cool about this part of Kenya where this trip runs is there are a lot of endemic species. So hidden in this logo are the stripes of a grevy zebra. Has anyone ever heard of the grevy zebra? Yeah, Miles, you have. You worked with them, those are awesome. So unlike the common zebra who's got thick stripes, the grevy zebra has super thin stripes and just occurs in the northern part of Laikipia. And what's cool is that you can take a picture of the right flank and it's like a barcode. And you can take that information, so Princeton University is taking that information to know the population size of those grevy zebra. All right. So I'm gonna take you on a trip there. We can't, we're not hopping on a plane, but I'm gonna take you on armchair travel to East Africa over here. And we're talking about the country of Kenya, which is found right on the equator. And it's got a multitude of different ecosystems. And specifically, I'm going to take you to central Kenya, Laikipia County. Kenya's really big. This county is the size of Rhode Island, to kind of give you an idea. And it's got a super interesting conservation model. You may have heard of the Masai Mara down here with Serengeti and the crazy wildebeest migration where there's like the crocodiles that are waiting and the lions on the other side and the hyenas. This is not a national park. It's made up of private and community owned lands where they actually have higher biodiversity and higher animal like wildlife species. And it also sits at the base of Mount Kenya, Africa's second tallest mountain, rising up to 17,111 feet. And I gotta say, it's pretty darn cool to put 1 foot in the northern hemisphere and 1 foot in the southern hemisphere and look up to a mountain that's got snow on it. This place, Laikipia, is also home to half of Kenya's endangered black rhino population. Does anyone know why it's called a black rhino versus a white rhino?
Because they're maybe.
Kind of, they're mostly all gray. Anyone have an idea why they're called white and black rhinos? Anyone remember? Does anyone know that in South Africa, there's more white rhinos? And who colonized South Africa? Here's a history quiz for you.
Yeah.
The Dutch, yeah, the Dutch colonized South Africa, and when the Dutch, I'm Dutch, so when they say wide mond, wide mouth, it sounds like white. And white rhinos, unlike black rhinos, got a big wide mouth, and they eat on the ground like a cow, so they're grazers. And so to differentiate, they called this rhino, which has like really cool little lip, a black rhino, and they are they're browsers instead of grazers, so they pluck at the bushes on the side and eat all of that. In Kenya, this population used to be over 20,000 in the 1970s. By the 1990s, it was poached and killed down to 348 individuals. The country is now dedicated to bringing this species back, and so through private and conservation efforts, they brought the population back now in 2025 to over 1,000 individuals. So it's a pretty exciting story. It's also home to cheetahs, which are super cool. Go ahead. Lions doing their natural thing. The buffalo, super cool buddy. And over 350 different bird species. This is called a crowned crane. And it's one of the most beautiful birds, I think, to watch while you're riding your bike next to it. So that's what I do, is I take people on mountain bikes and I explore this amazing space and I share with them not only the landscape, but also the conservation efforts that are happening. Imagine yourself getting to ride your bike next to elephants. You also get to see smaller species like the leopard tortoise, maybe following the footprints of the big cats, and having some fun along the way. Some water crossings at times, depending on the rains. And also sometimes you gotta stop because the camels are crossing. It's fully supported. So people are like, well, what about the lions? It's fully supported. We ride on Jeep roads and we have a sag wag with us with my famous little mascot, the rhino up here. And we've got even e-bikes, which is kind of crazy because we can use solar chargers out in the bush to charge. Camps, while you're on the biking portion, are out in the conservancies where you get to spend a night out in the African bush. I will tell you, there are a lot of different noises up the but it's pretty cool. And an opportunity to meet local community members. We stop for lunch and people are always curious, like, what are you doing? Why are you riding your bike through here? And they stop and you chat and you learn about each other. And in between, before you head up the mountain, we take a couple days of rest. You know, those legs get a little tired from mountain biking. But we specifically choose our lodges that are owned and operated by the community. So this lodge is pretty unique. It's completely built into the environment and it's owned and operated by the Maasai people. So they run the bush bars and they provide evening entertainment. No screens, but this is a guy playing the flute out of plastic piping. And then you get the opportunity to walk with the white rhinos because they've got a wide mouth. And white rhinos are not as territorial. They kind of act like cows. And so you have the opportunity to walk with white rhinos. Black rhinos, forget about it. So you're right up and close, and these are a brother and sister, that these Maasai group of people that have their own rangers that they're training up, that they are keeping 24/7 surveillance. Just a fun fact, rhinos in these conservancies cost between $10,000 to $15,000 per year just to keep protected. So it's a costly endeavor, but we're trying to expand rhinos to different places around Laikipia. Then we head up Mount Kenya. Totally different environment. It's kind of like you're going to a Scottish moorland, where you get to hike through giant heather and tussock grass was a pretty amazing backdrop. Some really, for those plant botanists out there who are ecologists, pretty endemic species that look like, doesn't it? And they have adapted themselves to survive at the equator where you get super intense sun during the day, but at night it drops below freezing. So you better bring your down jacket. This guy he's really soft and furry, also looks like because of it. Then you get up to over 15,000 feet and it turns into the lunar landscape. And we've got some amazing guys, local guys that we work with who carry up the heavy stuff. But it supports an economy in Kenya. We head up to the third highest peak, unless you're a, devout rock climber who really likes to do the technical peaks. We head up to Lanana, the third highest peak at 4,985 meters, so it's about 16,300 feet. And down we come through giant senecio, and again, plants that are evolved to this environment. Furry leaves, but these are over 200 years old, and depending on the rain, sometimes only bloom every 30 years. Okay, that's a cool adventure, but there's more to it, right? For me, there's more of an impact that we need to leave, and what's important, I believe, in travel and to giving back. And that's where Mazingira Conservation Works comes in. That's the nonprofit arm of the trip. And that is dedicated to giving back to the communities. And so I'm going to give you an example of the 5 different grants that we humbly started as a small nonprofit to give back to the communities. This group is working with Maasai women, who most of them have never gone to school. But in the 1940s, you probably have all recognized this, but prickly pear, or Puntia strictica, was introduced to Kenya, and it's taken over the landscape. This is native to parts of South America. You all head down to Mexico, prickly pear, you see it. And you probably also have noticed that there's a little bug that grows on it that if you crush it provides the red dye for a lot of the dyes that you see in South American or Mexican tapestry or rugs. But they've introduced that to try and deal with it. But the big thing is that this has taken over the landscape. And for these groups of people, their livestock is everything. That's the most important for them. And this is taking over the rangeland. So we gave a grant. Well, what I want to highlight here is that we didn't tell these groups what they wanted to do. We said, hey, there's a grant available. What do you want to do with this amount of money? And this group of women got together and they said, we want to remove this invasive species and we want to learn about other ways of earning income. So they put together a grant to say, we need to order pangas or machetes to remove, and we want to learn about vertical gardening. So we provided a grant to this group of women. We also provided a grant to youth. And we believe in investing in youth, and particularly in women youth, for the obvious reasons. But women, especially as though they are the backbone of most African communities and societies. So this is working with a bunch of youth about climate change education. This group of women are dedicated to protecting one particular river in Laikipia. And not only do they plant native grasses and bamboos, but they also get small amounts of money to walk and do census for the monkeys that live up in the trees. And so they are protecting their own corridor or riparian way for protecting the monkeys. This one, not all of the projects are super sexy. It's kind of hard to sell community conservation. A lot of it is sitting down and having a bunch of meetings. So this is a group that we work with one of the last dry forests in Kenya. So super old trees, and we're helping them to establish ecotourism models. Where do you set up a campsite? Where do you put your toilets? And that's what they asked for the grant for. They wanted some toilets and they wanted some information about ecotourism. And I think this last one that I want to share with you is probably the one that I'm most proud of, and the one that gives me goosebumps every time I watch this. In a Maasai setup, women don't have a lot of ownership. Women tend to a lot, and you'll hear this in the video, but they do most of the work. And this group of women came together and they said, hey, we want to purchase our own steers. So these women got to go to market and choose these steers, fatten them in a grazing program that exists, and then sell them at a market of their choice and get to decide what they wanted to do with the money. I get excited about that, but I think this next slide and video, hopefully the sound works.
I don't know if,
Want to say thank you.
sorry, please, one second.
Want to say thank you. You've done well. You've done well. Come with your friends to help us raise the voice of the lady, help us raise the voice of the woman. One thing I believe is that there's so much that a woman does at home. There's so much that she does. Much of it is taken as insignificant. By the end of the day, it adds up to something so substantial. Go inside the house and you find the woman, someone who's cooking for a big family, at least being 10, or at most 10, sometimes at least being 5. That very woman is the one who goes out in a Maasai setup. She's the one who sometimes looks after the house, looks after the goats, because the children have to go to school. Otherwise, if she doesn't do that, then it means she's going to compromise the standard of the education of the children. So sometimes you find her carrying a child at the back, sometimes carrying a child at the back and pregnant at the same time, but she must go. She must go and look after those things. So coming back in the evening, she must come back with some fire. Because by the end of the day, there is cooking to be done for people to eat. It is this woman who must make sure that where the animals live must be clean. So the manure must be removed. She's the one who does that. It is this woman who must make sure that every person, everybody in the community, in the close place, must be taken care. She has so much, but so much, yes, in the doing, but in terms of the appreciation, you find that it's almost, there's no sound for it. There's no sound for thank you. So we are saying that you have taken a step. We are grateful because you have brought us some steers. These steers will go a long way because they have one thing, they have given us some pride. We as women own some steers. We as women. So that when they are sold, no man will put his hand on and say, it's mine. No, this will be ours. And therefore, we are proud and we are happy that time comes. We'll sit down again and say, what do we do with it? Because we wouldn't wish a situation to come where you come back and you don't find some steers. Not now a steer per group, but steers. We'll have to come back, sit as groups, and see how we can ensure that they multiply for us. Because the multiplication of these steers means more money for us. It means quality education for our children. It means food on the table. It means clean water around us. It means some fuel, for example, in the aspect of gas instead of cutting the trees, instead of having charcoal. So it means us having money in our pockets. Once we have money in our pockets, we shall be good. Thank you so much.
So I guess the take-home message is that wildlife conservation can't happen without community engagement. And that's been something that I've been raised on and that I fundamentally believe. If you don't involve the people, these amazing species don't have as great of a chance to exist. I also think that you can go on travel and do the adventure and also have meaningful impact and have some fun along the way. So I'm excited to say I'm running a trip in January for those that are interested. It's a 15-day trip and it includes mountain biking and hiking. I have more information about that. And it also goes to supporting Mazingira conservation works. So you can join me, you can sign up for the trip, or you can go ahead and donate to the nonprofit to support the efforts that are happening there. But the big take home message here is, it's not a sales pitch, but it's really about how do you think about your travel moving forward? How do you think about, the amazing places that you can go to? What are the resources that you use? Even if you have friends coming up to Tahoe, what are you telling them how they can give back to the community? How can they support the efforts that are happening here? How do they get in tie? And I think, a trip to Africa is a big deal. For some people, that's really daunting. For me, it just feels like a normal thing to do. But that there is ways that you can go there and truly give back. And so that's something that I believe in, and that's the model that I'm trying to push and slowly spread the word. So thank you.
You say something, you must stop.
Ashe Oleng, which means thank you very much. You can also La Tierra, which means star. My Maasai is limited, my Swahili is a bit better. Jambo, Malaria, Osumingopoa.
It sounds like there's like 4 or 5 programs that you guys have funded, is that right?
Yeah, the question was, is there 4 or 5 programs that we funded? Currently, we've funded 5 different grants to community groups, and the goal is to expand the support to more community groups and maybe in the future expand the model to other parts of the world as well.
Okay, further question. Do these, the projects that you've invested in, do they reapply or how is what's the, what has that looked like and what do you want it?
Yeah, so the question was, do those community groups reapply for grants or how does that next process look like? Part of it, which is exciting to say, do you remember the group that was planting all those native species and trying to protect that riparian corridor and count monkeys? Well, they've really grown. Another aspect of this that it's kind of hard to sell, but part of what we do with these groups is we provide capacity building. So we held workshops where the group leaders of the groups came in and they learned about a budget. They learned about how do you write a grant. They learned about storytelling and they learned about reporting. And so some of those groups have taken those skills and that particular group is actually applying for funding for bigger organizations like the UN or the Dutch government. And so that's exciting. So what the goal is to actually raise those groups so that they're not dependent on my meager efforts at supporting them.
If you go on one of these trips, do you have some say in what the money is, which grant it's going towards? Is it decided as a group?
So the question was, if you decide to join on one of these trips, do you have any say as to where the money is going or how it's being given back? And I'd say probably not as much. I think what the big goal with it is that the groups get to decide what they want to do with the money. And I think there's a lot of historical sort of things that happen, especially in Africa, where people come in and they say, this is what you should do. You should get electricity to this school and you should, get computers. And sometimes they're taking a step back and being like, what do you all want to do? So that's a lot of the effort is not coming in. I think there's connections that can be made, but it's more saying, what do you need in order to take care of the plans?
Don't want to get into the whole politics or anything, but have any of your efforts been hampered by what's been going on with the lack of funding and international aid in the last 6 months?
So the question was, it's a lot of it that we exist. And a lot of the funding cuts that are happening, has any of the projects been hampered? I will say some of the projects under much more stress right now and are in need of a lot more support. There are still efforts ongoing, but I can speak to other projects that are happening within the landscape, and yes, severely being hurt, especially with USAID funding. That's.
I was, one of the women there was speaking English, is that common to them?
So the question was, is speaking English common, to them? So Kenya was colonized by the British. So the national language is actually English. However, depending on where you are in the country, some are more proficient in English. And this woman that is also a family friend, is an English teacher, high school English teacher, and so she spoke very eloquently. Yes. Yeah.
Have you, taken some other groups from Tahoe, or how many groups and how many years have you been doing this?
The question is, how many years have I been doing this? How many groups have I taken? The first group was right before the pandemic hit, February 2020. And I brought 8 people, and then I've taken 2 groups predominantly from Tahoe, one in 2023 and one last year. 5 people from Tahoe came, and one lovely woman from Boston. Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
What, one more question for you. What lessons would you take from there to apply here in the basin? Because I know like your other side of your work life is here. And I know you've given a lot of thought to that, so.
So the question was, how do I take what I do here in Kenya? And how does that apply to the work I do here in North Lake Tahoe, and vice versa? It's actually been a really interesting journey of how much I've learned from both perspectives. Running grants in Kenya is really no different than running grants in North Lake Tahoe. The challenges and the struggles that you face, but also the opportunities that exist. I would say, I think the biggest thing is, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture and the collaboration efforts that are possible. So I think in Kenya, looking at these different community groups, and tying the lessons, for example, that women's group that's getting steers, that's not normal. I'm just gonna say, like, that's not commonplace. That took a lot of years and efforts to bring women into the mix of owning cattle. But that, how do you take that model and spread it to other Maasai groups throughout the county? And similar here in North Lake Tahoe, how do you take all these amazing efforts that are trying to protect this big blue gem out here and get them to work hand in hand to support each other, and not overlapping and fighting for similar resources, so.
Are there cultural differences that you would say that like affect, how, in ways like how these groups kind of work together for the same kind of pots of money? Yeah, because obviously there's different kind of cultural things in the basin versus in Kenya.
Yeah, so the question was, how do different cultures impact the access to the funds?
How they interact? We have a bunch of different groups looking, trying to get, everyone's trying to get funding. What are some of the things that I guess you've seen have worked in each location to sort of reduce that conflict in a way?
Yeah, what are tactics that have been used to reduce the conflict over access to similar funds? With this in Kenya, I mean, it's launching, there's groups that are, we work with different groups, different tribes, different languages entirely, so that's been interesting in itself. I'd say, yes, there's definitely competition for funds and everybody is competing for funds even in this landscape. That's a challenging one. I'd say there's ways of, bringing the strongest application, the more thoughtfulness to the forefront, and then asking themselves like, what are you actually gonna be able to do with this? And how do you measure your success? And I think that's the biggest thing that I look at is how do you measure your success? And I'm the monitoring and evaluation person. Yeah. Yeah.
The other travel companies also have a foundation, as you say, that are trying to give back to the community approximately.
I think it's actually, so the question is how many other travel companies or other adventure tourism are giving back to community efforts or conservation efforts? Surprisingly, it's growing, sort of like the social corporate responsibility, right? You're a big company, what are you giving back? And there's some really good organizations out there. There's some really fantastic safari companies like in Tanzania and in Kenya. What I think is different is that they'll say that, 5% or a certain amount is going back, and a lot of them are going to schools. What I think is different about the model here is that is really dependent on how their margins are looking. Like, if they're doing really well, then maybe they'll give 8% back to community conservation. What's different here, and I don't know if it's gonna be a successful model, I'm trying it, but in every single trip that you come on, the donation is exactly built into the trip price. There's no question asked whether that money goes back. So there are companies like, Intrepid and Habitat Adventures or some other bigger companies that exist out there, and they're working with like big companies like World Wildlife Fund to directly support, or National Geographic has a bunch of trips. Rhodes Scholars also doing some stuff. I think what the unique difference is as well is that they kind of decide where the money is going. They say, this is where I want it to see happen in a school or this, and I think what's neat about this is trying to work with local nonprofits on the ground to ask the communities what they. Oh boy, another question.
What is your ask of us? You signed up, there you go.
What is my ask of you? I guess my ask of you is anybody who wants to come with me to Kenya in January. It's a pretty phenomenal trip. Happy to provide more details, but that, invigorates me. And then also the ask is, if you're kind enough to make a donation to continue the conservation work. So whether the trip happens or not, I'm still working with these groups on the ground and still continuing to support those women's groups and those youth groups. So yeah, consider signing up, making a donation.
Why have you decided to settle in Tahoe at this point in your life?
Woo! Question is why am I chosen to settle in Tahoe, at this point in my life? Yeah, to that answer, probably need a couple more drinks. And, I think what we're doing here in Tahoe, especially with the North Tahoe Community Alliance, is taking that model of sustainable tourism to a different level. It's something that's new, that's happening within the United States, and we basically changed the model of marketing Tahoe to say, hey, you're in Tahoe, we're taking those tourism tax dollars and we're reinvesting them into community needs. So a similar model, the community comes up to us and says, this is our need, this is what we want to apply for, and we say, cool, here's the public funds to make it happen. So Tahoe's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so when did you first hear about Tahoe, since you've lived in all these other places in the world?
Well, my whole life story. When I first hear about Tahoe, I'm gonna be very honest, because I'm Dutch, I'm very direct. I didn't know anything about Tahoe. I did my graduate studies in Salt Lake City, University of Utah, in sustainable tourism. And there happened to be a consultant who was looking at Tahoe and a destination stewardship plan, and my grad studies were on destination stewardship planning process, and so I landed in South Lake Tahoe in 2022 for the summer, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty darn cool place, and I learned a lot really, really fast. And then I'm back here, so, yeah.
Just to follow up on that question, what projects are you most excited by here now?
My favorite applicant.
What's your trip?
I've got a multitude of different applicants in the room.
You don't have to answer that.
I think I think there's a lot of great projects that are coming forward, and any of you that are in the community here and have know about projects. Our primary concern right now is workforce housing. Talk about a challenging subject to solve. But we're really looking at creative solutions to workforce housing in North Lake Tahoe, and we have funds to put to that. So we both have our tourism improvement district, you know, your extra line item of 1 or 2%, and then the lodging tax to put directly to workforce housing. I'd say I'm pretty excited about some of the ideas that are coming forward, and I'm also pretty excited about some of the efforts that are happening to continue to protect the lake. But I'm not gonna call out one specific, be a little politically correct, so. Anyways, thank you, asante sana, nimeshukuru. And if anyone has any questions afterwards or interested in the trip, feel free to reach out to me, thanks.